Well, good morning on this Thursday morning. We had a little blanket of snow last night, which is always an encouraging thing as far as making it look pretty outside. We are hoping that it'll warm up a little bit soon. But I wanted to get right to it today and share with you something that was shared with me a couple days ago. I was talking to my brother Gaius, and he reminded me of something in 1 Peter that I think is very applicable and helpful to us. 1 Peter 4:7 says, "But the end of all things is at hand. Therefore be serious and watchful in your prayers, and above all things have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God." And what's interesting there is that we know that there's a lot of people that go around saying the end is near, and panic and those sorts of things. That's not what Peter is saying. When Peter wrote this, it was nearly 2,000 years ago. So he wasn't an end time doomsdayer. Reality is that God has expected his people to expect the end of all things, the end of this age, the entrance of the eschaton, the coming of Christ, to be in any generation. Peter expected it, and we should expect it today. And yet, if we look at this from another perspective, we recognize that whether it is or isn't the end of all things, I mean, any generation could be the end of all things. Whether it is or isn't is not the point. It has been the end times since Jesus ascended to heaven. The end times is this period between the ascension of Christ and his descension again, his coming to earth as king to conquer. So we're living in the end times. We're living in this time when the end of all things is near. But there are events such as global pandemic, earthquakes, and those sort of things that makes us feel more aware that the end of all things is near. I'm not here to pretend that we know anything about when that is. Jesus actually said that's not our business. But doesn't it feel like a little bit more stressful scenario right now? Doesn't it feel a little bit more severe in circumstances? Whether it's the reality or simply the media or just whatever's happening. It does feel like that. And what most people will do when they think the end is at hand is they will panic. They will prep. They'll stockpile. They'll rush out and buy all the food they can, all the toilet paper they can. They will buy ammo and get themselves ready for the end. And this is understandable in our world. But when Peter is talking about the end of all things, when Peter is saying when you feel that the end is near, that's not what you're supposed to do. It's not the end is near. There's an earthquake that happened. It could be the big one. It's it. There's a pandemic that's going through all the world. He doesn't say, so get your go bag ready, get it by the door, and get your week-long supply, and make sure that you stock up on all your canned goods. He doesn't say any of that. He says the end is at hand. Therefore, he first says, be serious about prayer, which is why we're looking at prayer on Sunday morning, and we're going to be looking at the Lord's Prayer this Sunday on our live stream. Be serious about prayer, and then he says, and above all things, have fervent love for one another. Prayer and love. That's how Christians are supposed to respond to the feeling that the end is near. That's how Christians are supposed to respond in a crisis situation. Prayer and love. So simple. Perhaps it's interesting because it's not only what we were supposed to do in a crisis, it's supposed to what we were doing before a crisis. Prayer and love, prayer and love. Now he goes on to describe love. I think this is fascinating. He describes how we're supposed to love by saying, be hospitable to one another without grumbling. And if you've received a gift, give it. So the exact opposite of our world. The world says when in a crisis situation, prayer is useless. Your prayers can't stop anything. You got to look out for yourself and your family and take what you can. But Peter says that when you feel that the end is there, when you're in a crisis or a panic situation, you go to your knees in prayer. Be serious, watchful in that. You love one another. You love your brothers and sisters. And then you're hospitable. That is, you give of yourself and your things. And then whatever gift God has given you, whatever ability He's given you, you use it to others' advantage, not to your own. This is important, and I think it's helpful for us to consider that we don't know what we're living in right now. This is, in our lifetime anyways, unprecedented. But we ought to live as we did before the pandemic. We ought to live as we did before fear and panic gripped our culture, our society. Yes, we ought to be careful and concerned about those around us. We ought to love one another. We ought to distance ourselves and all those sorts of things and care for those in physical needs. But ultimately, we need to go to our knees in prayer. And we need to be hospitable. We have to give what we have to others. I would encourage you, one of the ways you can give, church, be hospitable in a time when you can't have people over to your house. How do you do that? One of the ways you can do that is check up on one another. My wife has started going through the directory, church directory, just alphabetically, and she's just texting or calling one by one every individual in the directory, just checking on them, just seeing how they're doing. We're working on some things as a church to make sure we're doing this more regularly, but I encourage you, you don't have to wait for something from us. Do it. Just get your directory out. Text one another. Be hospitable with your time. Be good to one another. The end is near. Be good to one another and pray. Be serious about it. Hope Thursday as well. Tonight we're having a Zoom prayer meeting. Check your email for a link. We want to make sure that that's protected from anyone who might not be, we don't want to be in there, a hacker or something like that. But if you follow the protected link, it's a secure link, you should be fine. But tonight at 7 o'clock is the prayer meeting. We'll see you then.